ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Ever since beef Wellington became a murder weapon, I've been wondering, what's up with mushrooms? Hello, Anne Jones here from What the Duck, and I'm trying to work out why would fungi be so poisonous that it can kill you? And death caps in particular, why are you so, apparently, delicious? What do you want, to be eaten or not? To find out, search for What the Duck and look for mushrooms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts or on the ABC Listen app.
For everyone in the room, except for the US Ambassador, Kevin Rudd, it was a smooth and cordial affair. Anthony Albanese's meeting with Donald Trump saw the leaders sign a multi-billion-dollar critical minerals agreement, and the US President fully back the AUKUS submarine deal. Today, ABC correspondent Jane Norman, who was in the room, on the one or two awkward moments and why, in the end, the timing of the meeting couldn't have been better for the Prime Minister. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to have the Prime Minister of Australia. Fantastic place. A lot of friends over there, and this is one of them right here. We've been long-time allies, and I would say there's never been anybody better. We fought wars together.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. President, for the invitation here to the White House and for showing us around the improved Oval Office. We are great friends and we're great allies. Today's agreement on critical minerals and rare earths is just taking it to the next level.
Jane, let's come to the details of this critical minerals deal in a moment, but why don't we just start by discussing the optics? Because this meeting, which we, were waiting for a very long time, from all accounts it went really well, didn't it?
It did, Sam. I mean, it was without doubt a huge success for Anthony Albanese. I guess you could say it's a bit of a case of, good things come to those who wait, because after this 40-minute, pretty freewheeling meeting in the Cabinet room today, Anthony Albanese emerged with everything he needed. But he also was shown to have a very warm and friendly relationship with President Trump, who is famously unpredictable. He's transactional and has used these kind of one-on-one meetings in the past, as we know, to ambush friends and allies or treat them with a great deal of hostility. But there was no hostility shown today in what was a really friendly meeting. He was almost heaping praise on the Prime Minister. The
Prime Minister is, as you know, Anthony Albanese, and he's highly respected, done very well in his election, and I hear you're very popular. He's done a fantastic job as the Prime Minister. We're here to talk about trade.
But there was a couple of awkward moments, Jane, I think we can say that. So why don't we start with those so we can get them out of the way? It came, of course, courtesy of a question from a journalist from Sky News, who I suppose wanted to land the former Prime Minister and now US Ambassador, Kevin Rudd, who was in the room, in hot water. So just tell me how this unfolded.
Yeah, well, what was notable about this meeting was that Donald Trump assiduously avoided areas of contention, whether it's defence spending, tariffs, those kinds of irritants in the relationship. And so I think that that's what the Sky News reporter was trying to draw out of him, that this is a very, very friendly exchange, but we know that behind the scenes there have been some problems. And one of them, or one that we knew about, was Kevin Rudd. This is Anthony Albanese's hand-picked ambassador to the US, who shortly after becoming the ambassador deleted some pretty controversial tweets about the US president. He'd called him a traitor and one of the most destructive presidents in history.
Have you had any concerns with this administration, with its stance on Palestine, climate change, or even things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if he said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President...
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead.
Now, it was the one big awkward moment that punctuated an otherwise very cordial kind of meeting, and Anthony Albanese could be seen laughing it off, but I think it possibly confirms some theories about whether or not Kevin Rudd will get a second term as ambassador to the US.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's always hard to know when Donald Trump is joking, right? It did seem like he was having a good old laugh about it, like sort of tongue-in-cheek. But, you know, it's always hard to read him. All right, anyway.
It is, absolutely. And I should sort of note, Sam, that as we were being shepherded out of the room, Mr. Rudd could be heard apologising to the president, but this exchange wasn't caught on camera, and so we don't have the exact wording of it. But, you know, perhaps he was trying to, smooth over any tension created.
I bet he was. All right, well, there were actually a few testy moments during the questioning from journalists.
Your power, the most powerful man on earth. Why don't you just enable Ukraine to finish this war tomorrow?
Well, if you knew anything about what you were talking about, you'd be able. You do. I don't think you do. Really, I don't think you do because it's. Where do you come from?
I'm from Australia.
Who are you with?
The Sydney Morning Herald.
Nasty guy. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to ask a question.
Go ahead.
But apart from that, as you say, it was really all smiles from Donald Trump and Anthony Albanese. And just to note, Jane, before we move on, it was not held in the Lion's Den, which is the Oval Office. It was moved at the last minute, right?
It was moved at the last minute. And so we're told that it was moved to the Cabinet Room simply because they signed this deal. And I mean, it was also a bit of a masterstroke of Anthony Albanese's to start off this meeting signing a deal with the deal maker, President of the United States, and so that both of them could sort of sit and scribble their signatures on these large pieces of paper.
I think that today will be seen as a really significant day in our relationship. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony. It's an honour to sign this, and we'll do it now.
This also gave the Prime Minister a little bit of cover as well, because he was able to have more of his officials in the room, as well as the Resources Minister, Madeleine King, and Industry Minister, Tim Ayres, who he'd brought along for this visit. So I can tell you it's apparently a bit bigger than the Oval Office, but we were crammed in there like sardines with White House reporters who, of course, were trying to shout questions at Donald Trump relating to much more domestic US issues than anything to do with the US-Australia relationship.
All right, okay, so Jane, the optics, apart from the Kevin Rudd moment, were all pretty good and really good for Anthony Albanese. But in a sense, I suppose you could expect that because Anthony Albanese, he walked into that room with a rather large carrot because we have something that Donald Trump really, really wants and needs right now, don't we? And that's critical minerals. Just explain that.
Absolutely. So Australia has critical minerals and rare earths in abundant supply. But the problem is, if you talk to anybody in the industry, they'll say pretty plainly that China has manipulated prices, it's manipulated the market to the point where the playing field is sort of unplayable. And so there's a consensus emerging around the world that governments basically have to throw money at this problem. It might be, not such a great option for some governments who don't like market intervention, but it's becoming clearer that if you're going to be competing with China that has the stranglehold over the global supply of these critical elements, well then governments, are going to be needed to basically make projects economic. And so the two leaders did sign this critical minerals deal. And in the first instance, it will see Australia and the US jointly funding critical minerals projects to effectively get them off the ground.
In about a year from now, we'll have so much critical mineral and rare earths that you won't know what to do with them.
All right, just to put this into some context as well, though, Jane, the US has relied heavily on China for these critical minerals, but that all sort of fell apart last week, didn't it? Just remind me what happened there with China.
It certainly did. And it's not just the US. China basically has the monopoly over the global supply of these critical minerals. So Australia actually digs them out of the ground and we send them to China to refine and process and export. And that's been the kind of missing piece of the puzzle for Australia, is taking the industry to the next level. Well, about a week ago, Beijing really kind of rocked its pretty fragile trade truce with the White House when it announced that it would be imposing some strict export controls over these critical minerals and rare earths. And they're kind of vital for everything from a smartphone to a battery. But what's of greatest interest to Donald Trump is they're also vital for weapons and military hardware. And so he reacted very strongly to Beijing's plans. They've not yet been enacted, and Donald Trump will be actually meeting Xi Jinping, China's president, in about a week's time, where he hopes to land some sort of trade deal. But in the meantime, he has threatened that if China does in fact stem the flow of rare earths and critical minerals, well then America will be slapping hefty tariffs of up to 100% on Chinese products.
Okay, so back to this deal then. What else do we know about it?
Well, what we know in the first instance is that there are about 6 or so projects in Australia that the US and Australia will be jointly funding. So the governments talk about the pipeline of critical minerals being worth up to sort of $8.5 billion. But what we know is that the money going into it is about $3 billion US in the first instance. So some of these projects are in Queensland, Western Australia, Victoria, like a graphite mine and battery anode facility in Queensland that's being jointly funded by the US and Australia now. There's a Northern Minerals heavy rare earths project in Western Australia. So we've got some sort of details on the kind of projects that are being funded here, because it's expensive, firstly, to extract rare earths. There's a huge amount of kind of environmental approvals that are required, and they're basically seen as uneconomic. And so that is the hope here with this money from the US and Australia, that they're able to make a lot of these projects more economic and actually start making the sort of supply chain more sophisticated to get to the point where we're not just digging it out and shipping it off, but also refining and processing here.
There's still some unknowns, I think, in this deal too, isn't there? It's unclear how soon the mineral supply to the United States would be ramped up. And I think Anthony Albanese's office has said that it's not a legally binding deal. So I guess there's still some questions to be asked about how this will all play out.
Absolutely. And I think that the biggest question, which is actually a question I put to Donald Trump, is how soon can Western nations like Australia and the US actually start to compete with China? Because we are decades behind Beijing. Mr. President, can the US and Australia really compete with China? Aren't we decades behind in terms of the development of critical minerals and rare earths?
You've been reading the wrong newspapers. We're not decades. We are way ahead of China militarily.
Very cleverly, China identified critical minerals and rare earths as a significant future issue many, many years ago. And so their supply chains are highly sophisticated, ours are not. And so we are really starting from behind here, and which means that it's going to take taxpayer funds to actually get a lot of these projects off the ground. And so those are very significant questions about just how soon we can actually get these sophisticated supply chains up and running to start competing with a country that's had a monopoly for decades.
All right, so Jane, the critical minerals deal was the headline item to come out of this meeting, of course. But during the meeting, Donald Trump also backed the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal. Now, that's been under review by the Americans, but it seems like Donald Trump is all
And now
in.
we're starting, we have it all set. With Anthony, we've worked on this long and hard, and we're starting that process right now. And I think it's really moving along very rapidly, very well.
He has given his presidential seal of approval, which would have come as such a huge relief to the Australian officials and the Prime Minister in the room. And that's because the Pentagon is reviewing the agreement. All the signals, we're told, were very positive about that agreement. But Donald Trump himself, as we know, is hugely influential, and he hasn't really said much about AUKUS. And so today the president was asked multiple questions about AUKUS, and so for the first time has publicly backed it. There was some suggestion from one of his defence officials that there was some ambiguity in the agreement that needed to be clarified. But then Donald Trump later said, no, nothing needs to be clarified. The deal's going ahead, and, the US will be supplying Australia with the boats as promised.
Can you tell us?
Well, he'll get that taken care of. These are just minor details that he'll take.
Can I ask you specifically on?
John, you're going to get that taken care of, right?
Correct.
There shouldn't be any more clarifications, because we're just going now full steam ahead building.
Because under the deal, Australia will acquire 8 nuclear-powered submarines. The first few will come directly from America. The government is now certain that Donald Trump backs this agreement.
I presume we still don't know exactly when we'll be getting these nuclear-powered submarines, though, Jane?
The first is scheduled for the early 2030s, but no, there's a lot of wriggle room around the agreement. It might be 3, it might be 5, and of course there are concerns that have been raised by defence officials here in the US as to whether they're building enough submarines and quickly enough for their own purposes, let alone to sell to Australia.
Okay. All right. Well, another big issue, of course, is tariffs. Donald Trump, he seemed to be giving the vibe, Jane, that Australia's got off really lightly and we should be pretty grateful for that.
Yeah, well, he made it pretty clear he's just not for turning.
Yeah.
He describes it as a powerful tool and will describe all of the amazing benefits, in his view, that come from tariffs.
I will say this, Australia pays very low tariffs. Very, very low tariffs. In fact, Australia pays among the lowest tariffs.
And so I guess that's a signal that we're just going to have to cop it.
Okay, so we've got this 10% baseline tariff, of course, and then on steel and aluminium imports, it's a 50% tariff. So it looks like we're going to have to just cop that for now. All right, so Jane, this was a much anticipated meeting. Of course, it's finally done. And, well, from all accounts, it seems like it was worth the wait. What do you reckon?
Well, I think so. And actually, the timing almost couldn't have been better for Anthony Albanese, simply because of what we were just discussing, China's move only a week ago regarding rare earths and critical minerals. It almost just sharpened in the president's mind how vital this resource was. And here we have Anthony Albanese rocking up to the White House with a proposal to kind of solve or address this key American vulnerability. By waiting a little bit longer, he's able to, leave Washington, D.C. with some crucial deals, assurances, and really, I guess, a sense that despite Donald Trump's America First rhetoric and the political upheaval that we're seeing in Washington, the alliance between Australia and the US appears to be as strong as ever.
Yeah, all right. Well, Anthony Albanese has invited Donald Trump to visit Australia, and the president says he's going to consider that, so we will see. But, Jane, the ultimate question, what about Kevin Rudd? Is he safe as US ambassador?
Well, that's a great question. He's about 3 years into his term, or two or 3 years into his term as ambassador. And so I think if you were to predict the future, I think that he'll probably finish his term and then that will be it. This was ultimately the PM's pick as ambassador, and so I think to save face, he's not exactly going to pull him out early from Washington, and it's likely that Mr. Rudd will just finish his term and then move on to his next project.
All right. Well, Jane, thanks for being not in the lion's den but in the room for us.
Thank you.
Jane Norman is the ABC's National Affairs correspondent. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.